My guest is Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, who represents the 24th Congressional District of Texas in the U.S. House of Representatives. Prior to being elected to Congress, Beth served as regional administrator for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. She was also the first woman elected to serve as the mayor of Irving after beginning her career in public service as Irving City Council representative. So during her tenure as mayor, Beth was really represented the city on a number of boards, and that included the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, and Texas Municipal League. And Beth served on the Texas Chair of Community Leaders of America. And as a board member for DFW International Airport, Beth oversaw the operations of the busiest airport in the United States, ensuring safe and efficient travel for millions of Americans flying through DFW each year. So, anyway, throughout her career, Beth has worked with small startup companies, mid sized private companies, Fortune 500 companies alike, running a strategy business consulting firm. Beth, thank you for this interview. What a life journey you've had. And when you graduated from Cornell and came back to Texas, could you have imagined such a life journey? And what really got you engaged in local politics in the town of Irving?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question. No, I would never have thought that I would have gotten involved in politics. My mother used to threaten that with me when I was younger. She'd be like, don't do anything because in case you ever run for election, it's going to come out." I'm like, "Mom, that's never been an interest." But you don't know how life is going to go. So, my daughter, when she was born, she's now 23, but when she was born, she had 9 surgeries on her eye the first year she was born. And we used to take her to our local park, and she was very sensitive to sunlight, and she'd cover her eye. And I went to our parks board and I said, "Can we get some shade in our park?" And I went back to our parks board, "Can we get some shade in our park?" And before I knew it, I was the parks board chairman. That's just how life rolls. You can't bring forward a problem if you're not willing to be part of the solution. Before I knew it, we had hundreds of volunteer, 100 volunteers plus. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we got the park built. So when we had a city council issue, I was asked to go speak with our city council representative, and after meeting with him, I was not real happy about how he was representing our neighborhood. So I decided to run for office. It wasn't anything I entered into lightly. I had a 2 and a 5-year-old, but nobody wanted to run against the incumbent because he had more money than God. He loved his job. He had a lot of support. He had a lot of name recognition. And people were afraid to run against him. And I just thought that was a really bad reason not to run and not to have somebody have a choice. So, with my 2 and 5-year-old in tow, I did retail grassroots campaigning. I went to 5 people that I knew. I asked for their support. They gave me 5 names of people they knew. I asked for those 5 names to give me 5 more names. And before I knew it, I had a real campaign on my hands. During the 6 years that I was on city council, I saw firsthand how to help people, how to use the office for good, and how to be very efficient with my time in office. I then went on to run for mayor. Irving is one of the 100 largest cities in the country, very diverse, in fact, the most diverse zip code in the country, as well as having a number of Fortune 500 companies headquartered here. So it gave me a lot of opportunities to work with the business community, as well as to work with folks from all, ranks of life in order to figure out what was best for the city. We did a lot of unique things, never afraid to be very pragmatic and to try new things. We were able to pass an ethics policy that the city had never had before. We got tons, $40 billion worth of, or $8 billion my last year worth of investment in the city. And we gained over 40,000 new employees in the city. And I think, happening at a time when growth was not what we see today, but very proud of the work that we did there. Then I went to go join the Trump administration working for HUD under Secretary Carson. And I say I saw inside the belly of a beast of a bureaucratic office exactly how decisions are made and aren't made. And when the position came available to be able to run for US Congress, I thought I could take the experiences that I had learned from a local elected leader position, as well as the experience of being in the federal bureaucracy, and kind of put that together to be able to represent the best interests of our constituents here. We have a very multicultural, diverse group of folks in North Texas, and more coming in every single day, coming from places like California and New York and Illinois, because they appreciate the environment that we've created. And how to take that and spread it throughout the rest of the country, I think, is key to what I do, but also just being very pragmatic. Running for election is nothing, that's ever an opportune time. You can think of every excuse in the book not to do it. You've got young kids. I don't have enough experience. I have to work on my career first. But we need leaders who are willing to step up and run, to take the slings and arrows that come as being a candidate, as comes and being as an elected official, recognizing that not everybody is going to like you. In fact, you inherit a whole lot of people who don't like you. I was really good friends with the mayor of St. Louis, the former mayor of St. Louis, and he said, the longer you're in politics, the harder it gets, because supporters come and go, but enemies accumulate. And I feel like when I put my name on the ballot as a Republican, I assumed all of the enemies of the Republican Party. It happens. You have to accept it, move forward, and also realize that you're part of a team. But you also have your own voice. You have your own set of constituents. That takes a lot of determination. It takes a lot of backbone. But getting out, learning around your constituents, what their priorities are, what their concerns are, what their issues are, so that you're able to very proactively share that with your folks up in DC, as opposed to representing DC in the district, I think is key to any elected official. But also having the determination to do it. Say what you're going to do, and then do what you say. And that has kind of been my secret sauce to being an elected official.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your whole journey. And one question that I have is, when you take on a new role, how do you decide the goals that you are going to set out for yourself? You seem to be very goal oriented. Does it come before you take on that position, or can you share maybe some of your thinking when you get into this new role? How did you establish goals that you want to accomplish during your tenure?
How do you set goals? I think it's important that when you're campaigning, you set out what your principles are, what your vision is, what how you see your morals playing into the decisions that you make. When you elect somebody, you don't really know what today or tomorrow they're going to be voting on. You can look at the issues that are right in front of you, but understand that by the time that they're in office, especially if they're in office for years, those are going to change. So do you agree with the positions and how that person determines how they're going to vote? And I think that's really important as a candidate to set forward. These are the principles that I stand for. And I've often said, look, first to me is God, second to me is family, third to me is country, and in the city and in our state. So look at the community that you represent, but make sure that they know how you make decisions. How do you decide what bills you're going to introduce, what bills you're going to support? Once you have that position, once you have, you've been elected, you get out in the community, you talk to people. You talk to people directly. In the last 20 months that I've been elected, we've had over 100 roundtables and business tours. I think I'm probably one of the most accessible Congress members that you're going to meet, because I'll go and talk to anybody. It doesn't matter if you supported me or you don't support me. I still represent you, and I want to hear what your thoughts are. So I think getting out and being accessible to folks, making sure that you give them opportunities to come speak with you, going out and talking to as many groups as you possibly can, but then listening. A lot of times we do a lot of speechifying, talking to groups, but we don't listen. And so I think having those opportunities where you're doing business tours, where you're doing roundtables, where you're going around and you are asking people, what is your pain? What do you see, my role being? If you were in my position, what would be the first things that you do? How would you do it? I think that's important to think about, but also pragmatically, when you're putting together legislation, we can have goals in mind. We can see what the problems are. But I've really engaged people who come to me with their problems to also sit down and work with me on what are the solutions. What would a bill be to that? How do you put in specifically the issues that you're concerned with and hope to solve that, but not create all sorts of domino effects and unintended consequences? So when I talk to people, I'm like, just like I was when I first got into community service and worked on a park, You got to think about what your problem is, but then you also have to think about what the solution looks like. Getting out and talking to people is the best way to make sure that happens.
Relationships that you have developed as mayor that have helped your trajectory to Congress. And you seem, as you just said, you stay in touch with people through roundtables, and you seem to constantly nourishing and fostering all of the relationship with the constituency, but also there are like some key relationships that have helped you and encouraged you throughout your trajectory. Share a little bit about that and how you go about maybe keeping relationships and developing them and seeking advice.
I think relationships are at the bottom of everything that we do. How you get along with people, people's impressions of you, whether or not they're going to bring forward, projects that they want to work with you on, all depends on whether or not they trust you, whether or not they think that you are effective, and that you're true to your word. So I've had supporters of mine for over 20 years. And a lot of people have a hard time, maintaining that support because people come and go, really when they only have a problem. But to me, it's always been about outreach, and it's about doing what I say I'm going to do, but also looking to make sure that you're championing other people's issues. I have great relationships with my business members of our community that I've had from the time that I was on city council, the time that I was a mayor, and I've only grown those since I've been elected to Congress. As well as I have great relationships with our local elected officials. We had a time last year in my first year in office where we were looking at appropriations of dollars for projects. And I know as an elected official, as a local elected official, I still hold that dear. You know more than anybody else what's happening in your community. You know where the mom and pop stores are. You know where you're investing money in some larger developments that you need to have more support for infrastructure, for example. And you work regionally. So instead of me asking somebody from a federal bureaucracy to decide how those dollars were going to be appropriated, I went to my relationships here. I got the mayors involved. I got our state representatives involved, regardless of party. I brought people together and said, we all represent North Texas. Tell me from a regional perspective, these are the applications for these projects. Which are the ones that you would give money to? Which are the ones that you would champion? And that's how I made the decisions on those kind of appropriation requests, was going directly to elected officials. The same token, I also have worked very well with our ISDs, understanding that businesses are moving here like crazy, but if they don't have the employees that they can hire in the future to stay here, they're going to leave. So it's important that we look at our ISDs as who these are going to be the future of our cities. These are going to be the future of our district. How do we make sure that they are folks that people want to hire in the future? How do we make sure they want to stay here, be successful? So this last summer and into the fall, I worked with all of our school districts, and I put them together with people who are hiring and people who are training to understand the various career paths that they could come. And it's all about kind of thinking outside the box, being very pragmatic, using the office to establish new relationships, and using the office to figure out how we can get those partnerships between our schools, between our businesses, and between our training institutions to really kind of create the next generation. So, you know, the last year and a half being a freshman in the minority has been difficult, but it's also been wondrously rewarding because I've been able to get relationships with my fellow Congress members. And, I think enough cannot be said for working with really great people and in developing those partnerships that you can use later on both sides of the aisle. I traveled to Minnesota with Dean Phillips, who is a Democrat. He is the chairman of Oversight and Small Business, and I'm the ranking member. And we went and visited communities, business owners in his community, to figure out from a small business perspective what did we need to concentrate on. It was an eye-opening experience, but I'm really glad. I'm really glad I did it. I've worked with mayors, former mayors now, who are now Congress members, and believe it or not, there's 34. There's 17 Republicans and 17 Democrats that used to be mayors. And I'm putting together a former mayor's caucus to work together on people who have seen it from, where the rubber meets the road at a local level, to be very pragmatic in our approaches. I think there's a lot of things that we can do together if we stick party on the outside and we work, solely on policy. Things like infrastructure, things like healthcare, really working on those on businesses and economic development, on housing. If we can keep the politics out of it and keep the relationships more at the center, I think we'll be a lot more effective and a lot more efficient.
Yeah, that's great advice actually for anyone deciding to enter the political arena, to be a consensus builder and to go where the needs are, and not be afraid to meet people and cross the aisle to actually identify what are the solutions can be. What would be in closing? What would be your advice to anyone entering the political arena? What is it? Do you have a motto or something that you tell yourself every day to keep going?
You know, people can get talked out of running for office. I say once you have made the determination to run, do it. Don't look back, be committed to it. Find all the support you can. And when you're in a position to offer support, do that as often as you possibly can. Again, relationships are key. Making sure that people can rely on you, that you are looking to be able to be helpful, that you are not doing it for any kind of selfish reasons or ego, because this is one of the most ego bashing careers that you could ever get into. Understand people are not going to like you. They're going to disagree with what you say, what you do, how you look. Just don't even bother about that. I often compare myself to a duck, and anybody getting into politics needs to be a duck. One, you have to let things roll off your back. But two, when you see a duck floating on the water, you just look at them and it appears effortless. What you're not seeing is the mad kicking of their legs underneath the water. It's a lot of work to do this job, but it is the most in other than being a mom, it is one of the things that I have really appreciated doing. You are in a unique position to be able to help people, to be able to develop how your area, how your district, how your state is going to look into tomorrow. And you're able to create that kind of a community, that kind of a country that you want people to aspire to. We're constantly learning, we're constantly getting better. But to be a part of that great history, I just look at it as a tremendous honor, a tremendous privilege, and something that I try to live up to every day. So be determined, be there, be available, be helpful, be a colleague, but understand why you're doing it and do it for the right reasons.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. This was really inspiring. So thank you, Beth, for this interview. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.